Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Genova Burns, Terra CRG, Meridian Capital Group, Wyckoff Organization. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AmTrust Title, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Hersha Hospitality, Hodges Ward Elliott, Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Newbanks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Brooklyn, New York. Far Rockaway? I like the patio. I like the beach clubs. Now I help Mom in the dress store. Now I want to work on the boardwalk. Harvard? Fulbright scholar? Law firm Cleary. Gottlieb? What is this? Nah, 7 Turks. We're going to go out and practice law. Hedge fund? What is a hedge fund? I'm going to be the king of hedge funds. I'm going to be charitable. Elle and I are going to run around the world, enjoy ourselves. Remember what Saul taught us and what Rose taught me. Today I have the founding partner and head of the investment management practice of Schulte Roth Zabel, Mr. Paul Roth. Thank you for being here. So tell me about Mom and Dad, how they came over, because Mom was born here.
Mom was born here. Her parents were from Russia, but she was born here. And my father's parents came over, and they sent for their kids one by one. He came over when he was about 10 years old, alone with somebody from the village who escorted him. They ended up in Brooklyn.
That was in Williamsburg?
Williamsburg.
It was Williamsburg.
Williamsburg section of Brooklyn.
Now, how did Mom meet Dad? There was a story that she was smitten by her, right?
Yeah, he was. He had a brother who had in those days they had egg and milk stores. And she walked in one day as a customer to buy some eggs and milk. And he saw her. And the second time she walked in, he approached her and he said, "I would like to take you out."
Now, was this before he became an attorney?
Yes.
Now, what's interesting about your father was his real name was Zuckerbrot, you said.
Yes.
And what happened that first of all, I have no idea how it became Zuckerbrot to Roth, but why did it happen? Tell me that story.
Well, Roth was my grandmother's maiden name. Zuckerbrot, she became a Zuckerbrot when she married my grandfather. My father applied to Fordham. In those days, he went to law school without going to college, and he applied and was rejected as Saul Zuckerbrot. His name was S-O-L Zuckerbrot. And he put the same application in under the name Saul Roth, and he was accepted.
So the Jesuits preferred Saul Roth as opposed to Saul Zuckerbrot.
I never had a conversation with him, but that's what the evidence seems.
When were they married?
Right at the beginning, in the Depression, in 32.
And so Dad at this time is a lawyer,
Yep.
but he's a criminal attorney. And Mom didn't really care for him being a criminal attorney, right?
She didn't like it at all. I mean, she kept saying, Saul, I wasn't there, but the stories are, I can't take these calls in the middle of the night from these criminals who want you to come down to the courthouse. You've got to do something else. And he did. He became a general practitioner.
Became a general practitioner. And you told me that one of the interesting things is you were born in 1939. In 1945, your father's office was downtown near Worth Street, I believe.
That's right.
And you were there for the VJ parade.
Yep. I still remember the confetti. It was an amazing moment.
Now, you were going to public school in Brooklyn at this time.
Yeah.
And then you had asthma.
I actually still remember the doctor's name, Dr. Nathans, and he would make house calls in those days. He'd bring his little black bag, and he told my mother and father that he would not be responsible if I had to live through another winter in New York. He didn't think it was good for me, so my mother took me and my two sisters down to Florida. We first started in Lakeland, Florida, where we had an aunt who had an orange grove, and then we moved to Miami Beach. And so for the last several years of my father's life, we were basically a separated family. We'd get together in the winter because he had started his law practice, his general law practice, couldn't get away, and my mother would take me and my sisters down to Miami Beach. We'd go there for the school year and then come back.
Now, Mom at this time was a stay-at-home mom.
Yep.
Who once did bookkeeping when she met Dad originally, I think.
Yes, she was a bookkeeper.
Right. And then, so now it's 1949. You're back over here, and your father had a friend who passed on, I think, and he goes to the doctor for an examination.
His closest friend was a dentist, and he died very suddenly. My father was very, very upset. My mother insisted that he go get himself, have a physical exam, which he did, and passed beautifully.
But then 2 months later...
2 months later, he was having lunch at a restaurant downtown, and he called over the waiter and said, "You better call an ambulance." And he was taken to Beekman Downtown Hospital. By the time he arrived at the hospital, he was dead.
Because Dad had been doing some work with a builder in Far Rockaway.
Right.
Okay, and he had bought this one-family attached house in Far Rockaway, and Mom has a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and she's alone. But the family, you said to me, was never alone, because your mother had a large family and a closeness.
My mother had a very large family. When we lived in Brooklyn, we moved from Flatbush. We were on East 19th Street between O and P, and her entire family was basically within a 15-block radius of that area. And so when we moved from Brooklyn to Far Rockaway, it was as though we were entering into a very strange land, and she was separated from her family. Not everybody, as a matter of fact, most of them did not have cars at that time. There was no subway system to Far Rockaway at that time, so we were kind of isolated.
It was also a two-fare zone, Far Rockaway.
Later on, it became a two-fare zone, but at that point, there were no cars. There was no subway out to Far Rockaway. So we moved to Far Rockaway in the summer of 1949, and unfortunately my father died in November of 1949, and she was left pretty much by herself.
So she's there by herself, and a woman who really, had not taken care of the family, now becomes a true entrepreneur. Tell me what Mom does.
She actually emerged as a feminist. I mean, from a woman who was staying at home, taking care of her 3 kids, and who had taken me down to Florida and separated from her husband the last couple of years of his life. We were in this new place. We didn't know very many people. So she decides she's got these 3 young children. What can she do to earn a living? And decided, well, she'll start a dress store in the basement of our house. But not knowing anybody there, how does she get customers? So she
Wait a second. More important, how'd she get credit on getting the schmatters in the house?
To this day, I will never understand how she visited all of the manufacturers of women's clothes dresses on 7th Avenue and convinced them to give her on consignment dresses. Somehow she impressed them as what she was, an incredibly honest, dedicated woman who said to them, I have to raise a family. If you don't send me the dresses, I can't sell anything and I can't make any money.
So besides that, she was the entrepreneur in getting the customers. You were saying she took the telephone book and looked at the names in the streets.
Correct. She walked the neighborhood, saw the better streets, went through the telephone book and wrote postcards to the people who lived on the better streets and said, come on in. We're going to be selling below store prices, and I think I will have the kind of merchandise that you will like. And she incredibly built a business. She was the kind of woman who, when she got a few customers coming into the stores, they started to bring their friends. And that's how.
And then she had her paid staff. She had her son over there who would put labels on tickets on the dresses. Your older sister who would do some sewing.
Oh yeah.
And the baby one learned later on, but your uncle was there also because he originally was in the furrier business.
Correct.
Now, so in addition to that, to make some money during this period of time, you had a variety of jobs. Talk about the milk can on the boardwalk. I mean, you were living on Beach Channel Drive?
Well, we were living on Grassmere Terrace, the corner of Grassmere Terrace and Mott Avenue, which was 1 block in off of Beach Channel Drive. And the boardwalk wasn't far. In the summers, during the day, I would get up pretty early, like at 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, ride my bicycle to Lawrence Country Club and see if I could get caddy.
So you were a part-time caddy.
Right. And at that point in time, if you carried a bag for 9 holes,
$1.50.
$1.50. Exactly right. So when I finished caddying, I would go up to the boardwalk where I got a job putting the milk bottles on the stand, and you give them, for $0.25, you buy 3 balls to see if you can knock the milk bottles off the stand.
But you told me there was a science to the milk bottle.
It seems to be there's a science to everything. And I didn't know it, but there is a science to knocking the milk bottles off the stand.
The
closer they are to the back of the stand, the more likely you are you're going to knock them off. If you set them up in the front of the stand, you're not going to knock them off.
The milk bottle and the caddying, was this before your bar mitzvah? And also another story, because it was Rabbi Rackman,
Yes.
who wasn't supposed to be there, but he stayed there.
The caddying started before I was bar mitzvahed. Yep. I'm not sure whether I got a job at the boardwalk before I was bar mitzvahed. That could have been a little bit after, but it was around the same time. Bar mitzvah was very interesting because I went to Rabbi Rackman and I learned that he wasn't scheduled to give a sermon, and I said to him, look, this is my bar mitzvah, and I know you're entitled to a day off, but it would really mean everything in the world to me if you could officiate at my bar mitzvah. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And he said to me, yes, I'll do it. He married Ellen and me.
Now, when you're in high school, you said to me you learned to be a true entrepreneur and a businessman by working at the El Patio, Cabana, and Beach Club, starting in the kitchen.
I started as a soda jerk and grill man, grilling hot dogs and hamburgers. It was pretty hot. I think I once brought a thermometer in and it hit 120 and burst. So I worked in the cafeteria. And then the better paying jobs because you got tips, were outside. So I worked my way up. I started as a chair boy, carrying chairs out to put them in the sand for the people who had lockers. Then next summer I became a locker boy, opening lockers and cleaning the lockers for those people. And then finally I hit pay dirt. I became a cabana boy.
Now, was that when after you graduated high school, cabana boy, or?
No, I think last year of high school I was a cabana boy.
So now here's this kid who was born in Brooklyn, living in the Rockaways. How did you decide you wanted to go to this school called Harvard?
My mother had a real thing about Harvard. She thought Harvard was a wonderful place. I'd never been to Harvard. I didn't know an awful lot about Harvard. I spoke to my high school guidance counselor, and she gave me a list of schools, and they were all Ivy League schools. And I was fortunate. I did very well in high school, and I was very active in the student council and things of that nature. So I applied to Harvard and a bunch of other Ivy League schools, and I got into all of them.
Now, fortunately, the cabana job helped pay, but when you were over there, the tuition went up, and having the pinochle decks and the gin rummy decks also got you once, what, $1,500 from the boys at the cards table?
Yeah, I mean, I saw things at the card table that I couldn't believe. I saw one gentleman lose his business at the card table, but these were big card games, and fortunately for me, these were also very generous people, and they tipped me well for serving them. And they were also very interested in somebody came, I remember it was sort of towards the end of the season, and one of the people of the Cabana Club said to me, I saw Harvard increased its tuition by $1,500. And I said, yeah, I saw that too. He said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, work harder. I don't think my scholarship goes up. And so on Labor Day, when everybody says goodbye to each other, they called me over and handed me an envelope with $1,500 in it. And I'll never forget that.
So you go to Harvard, and then you decide you got to follow in the footsteps of your dad, and not at Fordham Law School, but at Harvard Law School. So you're at Harvard Law School, and then you're graduating, and how did this young lady by the name of Ellen, who you had met, how did you meet Ellen?
My sister Judy introduced us. They were working in the same suite of law offices in the Chrysler Building. Judy was the telephone operator. Ellen was the secretary for one of the lawyers in the suite of offices who was a friend of her family's. And they became friendly. And Judy said to Ellen, you know, you really should meet my brother. All he does is study. You should go out with him, give him a good time. And Ellen says, what do you mean, give him a good time? By the same token, she came to me and she said, you know, there's this girl in my office who's really nice, but I don't think she goes out that much. And I said, what do you think I am, a social worker? And anyway, we met. We fell in love instantly.
So now you and Ellen get married. Now you told me about Rabbi Rackman. And how do you decide to go for a Fulbright scholarship in the Netherlands?
Well, it was Ellen's idea that I apply for a fellowship. And I said, okay, but I don't have a foreign language proficiency really. And so I went to the Harvard fellowship office and I asked them what scholarships or fellowships were available for somebody who didn't have a foreign language proficiency. And they said, well, you could get a Fulbright to either Denmark, England, or Holland. That would be fine. And I asked them, which is the fewest number of applications? And they said, Holland. And I said, I've always loved the Dutch. So I got the application, applied, and
we have a copy of the letter from the State Department giving you the Fulbright. So now you're finishing the year, and Ellen, who was the adventurous one, said to you, why don't we camp out and go around Europe for 4 months, right?
Yep. She said to me, I said, I don't know anything about camping. I never went to camp. She said, I went to camp. There was nothing to it. So we bought a small pup tent and sleeping bag and an air mattress and a little pump up the air mattress. And it was only then, as we started camping, that I discovered she had gone to camp but had never been camping before either. But we had the most marvelous time camping throughout Europe for 4 months.
So you come back now, move to Queens, and you go to this firm called Cleary Gottlieb.
Right.
And at this firm, you find out what something is called a hedge fund.
Yep.
And I think it relates partially to your brother-in-law Howard,
It
who
does.
was with a company called
Steinhardt, Fine, Berkowitz and Company
Right,
was what they set up.
Right, which was, as you said, it sounded like a delicatessen name.
Right.
And you helped form the business. And that was Michael Steinhardt's business later on.
Yeah, Howard actually had the idea to form it, and he knew Michael and Jerry Fine from Wharton, and so they set out. And I didn't know what a hedge fund was. And fortunately, Howard had a lot of confidence in me and said, please be the lawyer for it.
Yeah, I mean, and from there, in some of the comments that people have said, you've become to the hedge fund industry what Marty Lipton is to the mergers and acquisitions. So you were at Cleary a couple years, and as I would say, the Turks, the 7 of you, but not everybody was from Cleary.
No.
There were a couple from Cleary. There was somebody from Fried Frank, and
Yeah, 2 from Fried Frank. Steve Schulte and Charles Goldstein were from Fried Frank, and Jack McGoldrick was from K. Scholler, and Tom Baer was on his own.
And what year is this?
1969.
So it's 1969, and the 30-year-old Far Rockwood, with the push by Ellen, saying to you, don't worry, you could always get a job, something
Right.
over there. The 7 of you go out and say, there's a new office building at 345 Park Avenue, and we should be there, right?
Well, we decided we'd really present ourselves as though we belonged, because we were early 30s, and I think it was a wise decision. There we were, newest office building on Park Avenue, a bunch of young 30-year-old guys hanging out their shingle to practice law.
But the office wasn't ready yet, so you took space in the Waldorf Astoria, right?
Yeah, the former offices of the Junior League in the Waldorf Astoria. And we opened for business on August 4th, 1969. And the first morning, we were sitting there, and we're sitting there, and we're sitting there, and nary a phone call came in. And I know I was thinking, oh my Lord, what have we done? Finally, around noon, we get a call from somebody in the lobby of the Waldorf Astoria saying, you do know your phones are out of order, don't you? Yeah. That was a collective sigh of relief that we let out.
And over the, let's say it's now 69, we're at 46 years, 40?
Well, yeah, 47 years.
47 years. Now, besides building the hedge fund practice to be the preeminent hedge fund practice in America, and possibly with Europe also, with what you have, you were involved with certain things that happened with Battery Park City?
Yes. Battery Park City ran into a situation where they had dredged the sand from the Hudson River, and it was lying there. They had issued $200 million worth of bonds, and they were unable to really pay their debt service. They're going to run into a problem paying their debt service because they had been unable to build anything. The local boards couldn't get together on what could be built. New York City was in the financial crisis at the time, and the question became, what do we do? So I was asked to advise the underwriters, Goldman Sachs and Dillon Reed, on developing a program. And came to me, what could this be worth? Well, actually, what I was saying, the city had a residuary interest in a 99-year lease for Battery Park City. The state didn't want to give any money because the city had the residuary lease. So we came up with the idea of condemning the residuary lease value, which was valued by zero, at which point the state started advancing funds to pay the debt service.
And then over the years, I mean, you guys were involved with the Chrysler acquisition and the Interstate Bakeries.
Yep.
And the Albertsons over there. And as I was reading, I think the Alumni Association of the Schulte Roth and Zabel hedge fund practice is like who's who in the hedge fund business today. With a short period of time, let's talk about Ellen and your children. Tell me about them. You have two daughters.
We have two daughters. Both of them went to Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and both became lawyers.
And your daughters' names and their respective husbands and grandchildren, because otherwise you'd be in trouble.
Well, okay. My older daughter is Stephanie Roth. Her husband is David Dishy, and they have two daughters, Amelia and Isabel.
And that's the picture we have in Africa going there.
Yes, we went to Africa as a family together.
Right, which Ellen pushed. And then your other daughter?
My other daughter is Jessica Roth, and she's married to Ben Lawsky, and they have two children, Mo and Lexi.
And Ellen's and you have been involved heavily, in the hedge fund, charitable endeavors, and other charities. But Ellen, a couple months ago, was honored by
the New Group, which she is on the board of and has been for 10 years, and has been a great supporter of this off-Broadway theater company, and they've done some terrific productions. And the night that she was honored, Ed Harris and Amy Madigan, who were in their current production at that point in time, were also honored. They have a great director, Scott Elliott, who attracts really terrific actors to work with him, and they're doing a great job.
So as they say in the trade, certain things were bechet, okay? It was fortunate that your father had bought the house from the builder in the Rockaways, that mom was capable of, running a business that she had no idea of what it was, that you learned how to be an entrepreneur and a businessman at the boardwalk and at the golf course, but probably the best at the patio,
El Patio.
And that it was a wise decision, 49 years ago to be a young Turk. And as Ellen said, don't worry, you could always go back and work somewhere else.
Right.
And I'm happy that we've been able to tell the story today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.